On today's episode, I'll break down how I expect the Blackhawks goaltender department to shake out behind Spencer Knight, and I'll also project Arvid Soderblom's next contract.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at JackBushman2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And if you're someone who regularly enjoys the content that I pump out here on Locked On Blackhawks, please make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I know based on my analytics that still well over 50% of my regular viewers aren't subscribed to the channel. Make sure to go and hit that button for me. It's 100% free, won't cost you anything, and helps me out in a real massive way in growing my platform. But happy Wednesday, Blackhawks fans. Opening things up on the show here today, continuing on from my middle of the summer forward lines and defensive pairing projection episodes that I've dropped here in the last couple of days. Go and check those out if you haven't done so already, by the way, because they really do serve as a part one and part two of what I'm going to be doing here today, where I'll dive into how I expect the Blackhawks goaltender position to shake out both up in the NHL in Chicago and also down in the AHL with Rockford. And now, obviously, there's not as many numbers in the goaltender department compared to the forwards and defensemen, so I expect this will be a little bit quicker of an exercise here today, but I do think it'll be still both fun and informative to give us all a better sense of what's going down in net when training camp rolls around. But like I did for both the forwards and the defensemen these last couple of days, before getting into what I expect to be the NHL and AHL tandem to begin the season, I wanted to first start with a brief overview of all the goaltenders in the professional level for the Blackhawks next year, and I separated them all into three categories. The first one is the NHL starter category, which obviously contains only one man, and that is Spencer Knight, who was acquired from the Florida Panthers at the trade deadline to be the new goaltender of the future. And while I've been very outspoken about how highly I think of Drew Commesso ever since the Blackhawks drafted him in 2020, make no mistake about it, he does not possess the same kind of upside that Spencer Knight does. So he's firmly cemented in the number one goaltender spot for the Blackhawks next year. Guessing he's probably going to get somewhere around 55 starts. If you go and look at the numbers for Knight in his small stint with Chicago last year, 5-8-2 record, 318 goals against, an 893 save percentage. There were definitely some poor starts in there, but there's also lots of things to consider with the Blackhawks being one of the worst teams in the NHL, playing a lot of kids in those final couple of months when Knight was getting opportunities. But he definitely flashed the upside and the incredible highlight reel saves and the strong performances stopping, 40 of 41 shots against. We saw that on multiple occasions in those 15 starts as well. So no reason to think otherwise about Spencer Knight being in that starter's role. The next category that I have here for the Blackhawks goaltenders is the backup battle category, which I have three men in. I have Arvid Soderblom, who's obviously been up in the NHL with the Blackhawks for a majority of the last 2 years. Still needs a new contract, of course, but I'll be diving into that during what I expect his contract is going to look like, at least during segment 3 of today's episode. So make sure to stick with me up until that point. But he's starting things off here in this backup battle category. I also have Drew Commesso, who I just mentioned a moment ago, considering just how well he's performed in his first two professional seasons with Rockford, and also how well he ended last year down the stretch of the regular season and in the Calder Cup playoffs. If he has a good training camp and preseason, who knows? Maybe he could be right there in competition for the backup spot, even though it's more likely that he begins the season as the number one in Rockford, which I'll touch on here in just a moment. Still put him in this category. And then the third man that I have in this backup battle category is the true wild card of the Blackhawks goalies, and that's Laurent Brossoit, who obviously missed all of last season with a knee injury. Not only did he not play in a single preseason or regular season game, I don't even know if he took part in a single Blackhawks practice before having to undergo that first knee procedure. Originally, he was only given a 5 to 7 week diagnosis, ended up having to undergo a second procedure in November, and that apparently cost him the rest of the season, and we really haven't gotten any update on him since. And I've asked multiple different sources, and I've basically heard nothing all across the board. But what I will say is, if miraculously Brossoit does wind up being healthy enough to go at the start of training camp, he and Spencer Knight would definitely make for the best NHL tandem for the Blackhawks this year because, while it's mostly been in a small sample size throughout his career, Laurent Brossoit has been pretty solid. He's only made 20 starts in his career twice, with his career high being 22 back in the 2023-24 season with the Winnipeg Jets. But in 5 of his 7 NHL campaigns, he's had a goals against average below 3.0. And in 4 of those 7 seasons, he's had a save percentage above .918. 2.64 GAA and .911 save percentage for his career. Really good stuff, again, though, in a very small sample size while mostly serving as the backup. I was super excited about the addition of Laurent Brossoit last summer. I actually, in my Blackhawks bold predictions episode that I dropped last fall, said that Brossoit was going to become the #1 goaltender for the Blackhawks. Well, not only did that not happen, but we really have seen him maybe once or twice, I think, ever since I made that prediction. So apologies for the Laurent Brossoit jinx, but just because he is the most experienced and obviously the one who's had the most success at the NHL level of this group, I did include him in this backup battle category. So I have 3 guys who are in the conversation to back up Spencer Knight up in the NHL with the Blackhawks. Third and final category that I have here is the AHL locks category, which includes 2 goaltenders, Stanislav Berezhnoi, who the Blackhawks just gave an entry-level contract to last week, coming over from Russia, and then Mitchell Weeks, who's bounced between the ECHL and the AHL for the last 2 to 3 years in the Blackhawks organization. Played a career-high 32 games with the IceHogs last year. I expect he'll be in that same kind of tweener role based on the numbers that the Blackhawks have in between the pipes in the organization. So to get to the final answer here, who do I expect to back up Spencer Knight when the regular season opens up against the Florida Panthers? I think I have to go with Arvid Soderblom, right? Even though I know it's not the most exciting or go against the grain type of answer here, I don't really know how I can expect otherwise. First off, Laurent Brossoit, again, I have no reason to feel confident that he's going to be healthy enough to go when training camp begins. Even though Kyle Davidson, when we heard from him in his exit interview, he said he'd like Brossoit to compete for that backup job if healthy. Based on them giving a qualifying offer to Arvid Soderblom and adding Stanislav Berezhnoi to the professional scene, both of those moves kind of told me they're not all too confident that Brossoit is going to be healthy. Because if they were, again, he would likely be the backup behind Spencer Knight, and I don't think they would bring back Arvid Soderblom just to have him. Well, maybe they would keep 3 goalies on the roster, but I still think the more likely outcome would be sending Soderblom to the AHL, which he'll likely have to clear waivers in order to do. You, A, risk losing him for nothing there, and then B, he'd be taking away starts from Drew Commesso, Stanislav Berezhnoi. I don't think that would be best for any of the 3 goaltenders down there. So based on the addition of Berezhnoi and giving Soderblom a qualifying offer here in these last couple of weeks, again, both of those moves tell me the Hawks aren't all that confident that Laurent Brossoit is going to be ready when training camp in the preseason begins here in just a couple of months. So my expectation is that he's going to begin this season just like how he started and ended the last one on LTIR. Well, Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom, I expect to be the 1-2 tandem for the Blackhawks when the 2025-26 season opens up. There is my thought process behind that, Blackhawks fans. But coming up in just a moment here, I'll dive into how I expect things to shake out in net down in the AHL with the Rockford IceHogs. But first, I do got to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Summer sports are now in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And you're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? It's super easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. And whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or sweating out a bet into the ninth inning, FanDuel really does make it feel like I'm a part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, then that's perfect because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 worth of bonus bets if your first bet wins. All you got to do is open up the FanDuel app today or check out FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Again, that's the FanDuel Sportsbook app, or you can check out FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. Before I get into segment 2, again, a reminder to please go and hit that like button, hop in the comment section below, and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And also, be on the lookout for my Blackhawks 2025 top 10 prospects list, which will be dropping either on Friday or Saturday here this week. The episode that I'm going to be recording tomorrow is an interesting conversation around recent trade rumors involving Blackhawks young forward Lukas Reichel. But in segment 2 on today's episode, make sure to keep your eyes out for that, Blackhawks fans. But picking up where I left off from segment 1, obviously with Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom being how I expect the NHL tandem to shake out when the regular season opens up. That leaves Drew Commesso, Stanislav Berezhnoi, and Mitchell Weeks as the goaltenders down in the AHL. And not all that surprising here either, right? While I do believe Drew Commesso, based on what he showed us last season, I mean, an incredible final 3 to 4 months of the year, I really do think he's getting very close to being NHL ready. But I do also recognize that as a kid who's just turned 23 years old a couple of days ago, by the way. Happy belated birthday to Mr. Drew Commesso. But for a young man, only 23, I know he's been in the AHL for 2 years, but it's still all about experience as a goaltender. And I don't think it would hurt to give Commesso this opportunity as the number 1 here in Rockford, as opposed to being the backup for Spencer Knight and starting, 1 out of every 3, 1 out of every 4 starts. At this point, right here, right now, we don't absolutely need him in that role. We need him to continue to get the lion's shares of the opportunity, stay fresh, continue developing, and maybe in a year or so creates even in the second half of the season, depending on how things go with Soderblom, what happens with Laurent Brossoit. Obviously, there's a lot of ties all around in this Blackhawks goaltender department, but in the second half of the season or at the start of next year, could be a Spencer Knight, Drew Commesso 1-2 tandem. That'll be a lot of fun to watch up in Chicago. But fully expect Drew Commesso to be the number 1, getting the lion's share of the chances in between the pipes for the IceHogs, just like Spencer Knight will be doing for the Blackhawks, and for good reason, right? Like I said, Commesso was excellent last year in his second full season at the professional level, 18-15-4 record, but with a 2.5 GAA, 928 save percentage, 2.54 GAA, 911 save percentage, and 4 shutouts in 39 regular season games. And then, he might have done his best work in the Calder Cup playoffs, where unfortunately the IceHogs blew a 2-0 series lead to the Milwaukee Admirals. But Commesso was spectacular in both of their postseason series. Altogether, he had a 2.35 GAA and 926 save percentage, along with 1 shutout in 7 postseason contests. Yeah, he's going to be the number 1 for the Rockford IceHogs. Serving as his backup, though, I expect to see Stanislav Berezhnoi in this role. Like I said, he just signed a 2-year entry-level contract with the Blackhawks last week. He's a 6'4" Russian netminder who just turned 22 back in June, so still a very young man in his own right. And he went 12-10-2 with a 2.5 GAA, 928 save percentage, and 1 shutout in 27 regular season games for a couple of teams in Russia's VHL last year, which is the second-tiered professional league over in Russia, and also followed that up with a 2.66 goals against and 921 save percentage in 7 postseason games. His contract got terminated over in the KHL. Blackhawks pounced on him like hours after, literally. So they must have been having their eyes on Stanislav Brezhnoy and clearly went and made this addition, like I said, for a reason, I think to kind of solidify things down in the AHL, if I had to guess again, because they're not all that confident that Laurent Brossoit can be the NHL backup. And then there's Mitchell Weeks too, who, like I said, will probably be jumping between the AHL and the ECHL, played a career high 32 games in the AHL last season with Rockford, went 11, 16, and 4 with a 3.28 GAA, 886 save percentage. He's obviously going to be the odd man out of this group, with Brezhnoy being a young contract that they just gave an ELC to. Drew Commesso, second round pick, who's obviously the head honcho in goal of this group. So pretty cut and dry here for the Blackhawks goaltenders. Could make for a shakeup, though, if Laurent Brossoit, like I said, does somehow wind up being healthy. And it'll be a very interesting number situation at that point in time. Do the Blackhawks keep 3 NHL goaltenders on their roster? I don't know. That'll be fascinating to watch when training camp opens up. But that takes care of how I think the Blackhawks goaltender department is going to form when the 25-26 regular season begins. Again, pretty cut and dry. Not the most exciting episode ever, but definitely wanted to follow up with this after going through both the forwards and the defensemen in these last couple of days. But coming up in just a moment, since we're on the topic of goaltenders here today, I am also going to be breaking down what I expect Arvid Soderblom's next contract to look like. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no off season, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can go and find Locked On NHL right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, Arvid Soderblom and Wyatt Kaiser are now the only 2 restricted free agents the Blackhawks need to figure out new contracts for during the remainder of the summer. And just a couple of days ago, we got a little bit of an update on Arvid Soderblom as we found out he filed for arbitration and has his arbitration hearing set for July 28th, which is next Monday. Wyatt Kaiser is not arbitration eligible, by the way, so no date for him. He honestly might be the last one to get his contract ironed out here. But as far as things go for Arvid Soderblom, like I said, I guess I didn't already talk about this on today's show. I was really torn about bringing back Arvid Soderblom because he's about to turn 26 this August. He's never really been consistent in the NHL. He fills a role this season as the backup potentially behind Spencer Knight, but I don't see a future for him here in Chicago, and giving him a deal more than 1 year, I just think clogs up this goaltender department more than the front office would like. And that's the frustrating part about Laurent Brossoit not being healthy, because quite honestly, if Laurent Brossoit was healthy, we have Drew Commesso coming up in the pipelines. I don't really know if the Blackhawks bring back Arvid Soderblom. I do know he had his best NHL campaign last year, but it still wasn't really all that good. And like I said, he's about to be 26. So he's been on the professional scene for 4 years now. And I just think he's kind of shown us what he is at this point in time. But again, I do also understand that because Brossoit is out and they probably would prefer Commesso to be the number 1 in Rockford right here, right now, as opposed to being the number 2 behind Spencer Knight. But it makes for a really interesting situation in terms of what's going to happen here with Arvid Soderblom's contract. In a recent article written by Scott Powers of The Athletic, he projected that Soderblom would get a 2-year deal with a $1.7 million cap hit, up from the $962,000 AAV that he had on his last deal. And he also noted that that was the projection system that he uses, and he kind of feels like it could be closer to $2.5 million per year for Arvid Soderblom. And to me, also, by the way, him going to arbitration is very interesting because that it tells me that he wasn't super happy with the Blackhawks qualifying offer that they gave to him. And he's definitely trying to use arbitration to his leverage to get a little bit more money. I'm thinking, just given, how the Blackhawks have given out money to Peter Mrazek and other goaltenders over the years, right? Arvid Soderblom is probably wondering if he could get a little bit more than he probably deserves. I don't know if that arbitration hearing is going to wind up going in his favor, just because, as I broke down a moment ago, like, the stats aren't all that great for Arvid Soderblom in his career. He's never had a save percentage above 900. He's got an abysmal win-loss record, and I know there's a lot of things that tie into that, but in an arbitration hearing, the Blackhawks are going to be, putting these things against him. And I just think it would make for a very interesting situation here personally. So I was a little bit surprised to see that Arvid Soderblom was going to arbitration, but in terms of what I expect for him to get on his next deal, it's interesting. I would be willing to give Arvid Soderblom, and I don't even know if he'd want to sign along like a 2-year deal here in Chicago, because I just don't know if this is the best situation for him to prove himself in. But again, I don't know if there's going to be many other NHL clubs all that interested. It makes for a really interesting situation. But considering his numbers, I went and looked at 3 other goaltenders who have been given contracts here this summer just to get a little bit of a comparison. Alex Lyon of the Detroit Red Wings. He signed a 2-year deal with a $1.5 million AAV. Spent the last 2 years with the Red Wings, I should say. He's 32 years old, and last year he went 14-9-1 with a 2.81 goals against and an 896 save percentage in 30 games. And the year before that, he had a 3.05 GAA and a 904 save percentage in 2 shutouts. Those numbers to me are both, they're better than what Arvid Soderblom has put together in the NHL. And that was a $1.5 million AAV for Alex Lyon over 2 years. Vitek Vanacek, who was awful, though, at the same point in time with the San Jose Sharks last year, 3.88 goals against, 882 save percentage in 18 games. And even with the Florida Panthers, he got a 3.00 GAA and 890 save percentage in 7 games. So not a good year for Vitek Vanacek. It's been a struggle for him really ever since he's left the Washington Capitals. But he did get a 1-year deal with a $1.5 million AAV. So maybe Alex Lyon got the bad end of the bargain in free agency here. And then Anton Forsberg is the last one I want to bring up. He's undoubtedly been better than Arvid Soderblom has been. Blackhawks legend, Anton Forsberg, I should say. He's 32 years old. Last year, he had a 2.72 GAA and 901 save percentage, along with 3 shutouts in 30 starts. He signed a 2-year deal with a $2.25 million AAV. So, quite honestly, the maximum Arvid Soderblom should get is $2 million, in my opinion. And I know the Blackhawks are in a spot financially where they could certainly shell out more. I would be willing to shell out more if Arvid Soderblom was wanting to take a 1-year contract, because this season is really the only year I think we need him in this organization, right? I know, like, he fills a spot as the backup right here, right now, but after this year, I think Drew Commesso is going to be ready for that spot. And I just think signing Soderblom to a 2-year contract just muddies things up even more for this Blackhawks goaltender department. I know Adam Guyan is still years away, right? But I just don't really see the need to have both, or to have all 3 of Spencer Knight, Arvid Soderblom, and Drew Commesso signed on for multiple years. Spencer Knight will need a new contract after this year, but as a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, Blackhawks should be able to work that out swimmingly. So a 1-year contract to me definitely makes the most sense for Arvid Soderblom. I would think 1 year, $2.5, $2.6 million. Blackhawks can shell out some more money to give him a shorter term deal. That's the way I would be looking. I apologize, Blackhawks fans, if you guys can hear that car alarm that's ringing right outside my window. That's probably going to be my cue to wrap up today's episode. But that's what I project Soderblom's contract to be. 2 years, $1.7 million if he does wind up getting a 2-year deal. If I were the Blackhawks, I'd be willing to shell out a little bit more on a 1-year contract to avoid kind of muddying things up for the 26-27 campaign when Drew Commesso is likely NHL ready. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'll see you on the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.